Hello, my name is Alexander Moss, and this is my presentation for Module 4. I'll discuss two theories on culture. The first will be Hofstede's cultural dimension theory. This theory is a lens to compare cultural dimensions of different countries. The second will be on cultural intelligence theory. This theory is a branch off intelligence theory, suggesting that there is more than just cognitive intelligence, or IQ, but many other abilities that indicate success in certain situations. Hofstede eventually categorized culture as being scaled according to 6 different dimensions. Power distance is a toleration of unequal distribution of power. Countries described as having low power distance are more egalitarian. High power distance countries are like an oligarchy where few have power. Individualistic countries praise and prioritize the individual. Collectivistic countries place the greater good of groups higher than the needs of an individual. Or in Spock's words, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Masculinity refers to rigid roles and the value of achievement. Femininity values caring and nurturing and considers the roles flexible. People can change. Uncertainty avoidance can be thought of as the degree of comfort with ambiguity. Those who have high uncertainty avoidance have lots of structure in place to reduce or decrease risk. Low uncertainty avoidance is having an openness to change. Long-term orientation is like playing the long game. Sacrifices are willing to be made for a better outcome in the long run. In contrast, short-term orientation values instantaneous gratification. Take what you can now because the future isn't guaranteed. Indulgence means to live in the moment and to be more focused on materialism. Restraint is to have self-control over one's impulses and live modestly. Hofstede's theory, like most theories, has its limitations and advantages. The limitations are listed first. According to Dimitrov, this theory applies to countries and doesn't really dive into the complexities of regional or religious culture and should not be used on individuals. Dimitrov further argues the sample data that was used is now old, from the 60s and 70s. Additionally, it is biased as it didn't focus as much on communistic or third world countries, but based on international IBM employees. Finally, scholars have also noticed the dimensions overlap. However, there remain advantages. The most significant is that it's simple and repeatable. It is a foundation that can be used to understand the complexities of other cultures and how they relate to your own. For these reasons, it's been a proven good starting point for international businesses per the Culture Factor Group. Let's review 2 examples or scenarios. Think about USA and where it scales on the dimensions. This is kind of how I believe. Now think about Japan. Are your answers the same as mine? Probably not quite, because it's relative and we've had different experiences. Now I'll apply Hofstede's theory to my profession, specifically while working with other militaries. This would likely occur with NATO. This could include working with another country on strategy design. When designing said strategy, should the focus be on the long-term or short-term objective? How risk-averse is the strategy? Who gets to decide this? Myself or someone high up in the chain of command? Is it reasonable for me to solicit the advice of my subordinates? Using Hofstede's model as a starting point can provide a formula to answer some of those questions. Pivoting away from Hofstede's theory, I will now discuss the cultural intelligence, or CQ, theory. Overall, this theory implies that an individual who can adapt to a given cultural context and successfully choose the correct action has high CQ. As noted by Kanan, Early and Ong originally coined the term CQ, and it's similar to social and emotional intelligence. It is an ability. Ong and Van Dyne believe social and emotional intelligence are culture-bound, or someone with high emotional intelligence in one cultural context could have a low emotional context in another. On the other hand, CQ is culture-free, which means high CQ is transferable in cross-cultural contexts. CQ has 4 elements: cognitive, which you can think of as the knowledge of the other cultures; motivational, or the effort one puts into different cultural situations; metacognitive, which is the awareness one has of the cross-cultural situation. Finally, the behavioral element can be thought of as acting suitably, both verbally and non-verbally, in those situations. I think one of the biggest limitations of CQ is it is difficult to increase. One can read and take classes, but CQ is dependent on experiences. Traveling and getting true cross-cultural experiences can be very expensive. Lorenz et al. Cautions that across 4 studies, high CQ is correlated to poor ethical decisions, where the individual may act in their own interest at the expense of others. This theory does have advantages. Primarily, it is highly applicable if all 4 elements are met and can be flexible for most situations. Furthermore, it is holistic. These 4 elements are interconnected and they build upon each other. Applications of the cultural intelligence theory regarding the military are very similar to what was previously discussed, especially with NATO relations. Negotiations, more so on an individualistic sense at least, can be improved with the holistic approach of cultural intelligence. In contrast to Hofstede's theory, this one embraces empathy, which can reduce misunderstandings and ease tensions with the local populace in deployed locations. As an example, is the U.S.'s involvement in Afghanistan and the success or failure of interaction with the local tribes, such as avoiding eye contact with elders and not showing the bottoms of one's feet. In conclusion, we discussed several theories. Hofstede's is overall a good starting point, but is limited to thinking on a national level and not about the individual. CQ theory applies to specific contexts, but is more difficult to learn through experiences. I hope you learned some things from my presentation, and I'm happy to hear questions or concerns on the discussion board.